So thanks very much, Mark. That was nice. It was a nice prelude, I guess, to think about. As Mark said, we have a couple of stories today about Christ that may give us a bad impression of him. Or, he doesn't come off looking great. If you just take these stories, isolations, people can read them and be like, why is Jesus getting mad at a tree? He's hungry, he doesn't have food. Like, why? He's gonna curse a tree? How petty, right? But I don't think that's the point. So I'm going to try to tackle the events of today, the cleansing of the temple and the fig tree, and also speak about one of the prophecies that there's a lot of Genesis this morning, and the very beginning is all about creation and also of Adam and Eve and the fall and how they're kicked out of Eden. So I'm going to focus on the character of Christ and the power of Christ. I'm going to try to tie all. I know this sounds crazy, right? But it's all. I think the Pascha book is pretty amazing because sometimes you can find things in the prophecies and circle them back to the New Testament and what the Gospels are saying, and sometimes it just makes sense in ways that you don't even understand. So let's start with the character of Christ. As we all know, yesterday was Palm Sunday, and we see a lot of what Christ is like on Palm Sunday, because Christ is this walking contradiction. He's this paradox that doesn't quite make sense, right? He's coming in to Jerusalem, and he's being hailed as a king. He is the one who's going to come and save them. They're saying, Hosanna, my Savior, you're coming in, you are king. And you can imagine this scene if it played out in a movie, right? And let's say it wasn't Christ. Let's say it's somebody who's coming in to save a city. He's probably coming in on this big war horse, right? With an army behind him. I'm marching into the city to save this city. This is who I am. I'm your king. But Christ doesn't do that. This great hailed king, lots of people, we all know, he rode in on a donkey. So how can God, this is the amazing thing about Christ, he is so great, he is king, he is hailed, but at the same time, he is equally humble. And that's something that you wouldn't expect to see in the same person. He's gentle and meek, yet he's coming in as their king. So here is God. He's the lion and he's the lamb. He is someone who has an infinite amount of mercy, right? But he's also infinitely just. He is the ultimate of highness, but he's also ultimately accessible to us. He is majesty and meekness, power and weakness. He's sovereign over everything, but submissive to our own wills. He's not going to make us do anything we don't choose. Someone who has control over all, but will submit to our own wills even, and submit to the will of God. So that's the character of Christ that we start to see yesterday. This is this duality that doesn't exist in anyone else, this incredible mix of the best of everything. He combines all these character traits, and, it's hard for us to understand how. He's also very powerful. And we learn a lot about Jesus' power when you start to think about the temple today, right? So as we know, Jesus walks into, in Mark it says he sees the fig tree, and he's hungry. He goes for fruit, he can't find any. And then he curses it, and then he goes to the temple, and he starts overthrowing the money changers. He starts yelling at the Pharisees and all the people there, and he's cleansing the temple and getting rid of, the evil there. But he's also getting rid of something else. It's Passover time. So, you know what the people there are selling? They're selling animals to be sacrificed, because that's what the Jews did in Passover. So I read somewhere that there's probably 300 to 400,000 Jews in Jerusalem at that time. You can imagine them all going to the temple to get their animals for sacrifice. It's like something they had to do, right? It was just like, this is what we do. This is part of the feast. It wasn't a spiritual event for them. The temple has just become this place of busyness and action, but no actual spirituality. So Jesus is getting rid of the animal sacrifices. And that is very symbolic in more than one way. Because as we're told in the 9th hour today, if you could bring it up, Anthony, the 9th hour prophecy. Can you? No? The 9th hour prophecy has the story of the fall of Adam and Eve. And it's interesting that Jesus is getting rid of the animal sacrifice. And there's a reason for that. It's because he is to become that sacrifice. You don't have to, if you go to the end of the chapter. We all know the story of Adam and Eve. You know, God creates this amazing Garden of Eden for them where they have dominion over everything. There's animals for them to take care of, to name, right? But he says, of one tree you cannot eat. He says, of one tree you cannot eat. And we know what happens. They made a mistake. They ate from the apple in the middle of the garden. So what happened to them? At the end of the prophecy today, it says that they're thrown out of Eden, and God puts a cherubim at the gate of Eden. And with the cherubim, there is a flaming sword going in every direction, guarding the tree of life. This flaming sword. And this seems kind of unfair, right? If you think about it. All they did was eat from the little apple. All of a sudden, they're thrown out of Eden. Eden, this place of ultimate bliss, ultimate joy, ultimate happiness. They made a mistake. And you try to think like, you know, the result of that is everything we have today, is everything we have this week. Good Friday, Jesus' ultimate sacrifice on the cross for us, right? Why couldn't it be that they could have just apologized and been like, hey, I'm sorry we made a mistake. If you could just move the angel out of the way, we'd love to get back into Eden where there's ultimate bliss, right? It seems a little bit unfair. Kind of the way it seems unfair that Jesus today, he's cursing trees. He's throwing people out of temples. Why? Well, as we said before, God is ultimate mercy, but he is also ultimately just. And, you know, we live in a society today where if crimes would go unpunished, right, it would be chaos. If you commit a crime, can you imagine someone who did something awful, who, you know, hurt your family or someone you know in a very bad way, and there was never any punishment for that? What kind of, you know, what if they were just like, you know, we made a mistake. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to kill your brother. I'm really sorry. That's not enough, right? There has to be justice. And God is just. So who can stand the fiery sword? How can we get back into Eden? That is really what the power of Christ is that he is the one who opened that gate again for us. He opened that gate again for us to get back into Eden. And not for us to get back into Eden, but for Eden to enter the whole world. That's what Christ has done now. He's opened up the door so that the ultimate bliss, the ultimate happiness rests on this entire world, and it rests inside of us. You know, we were all baptized. We take communion. We have, you know, the temple that Jesus cleansed today in Jerusalem, that doesn't exist anymore. The temple of God is now inside of us. We now have Eden inside of us, essentially. So now we think about what Christ did, and now we think about the fig tree again. And if you look at it as a symbol, if you look at the temple being inside of us and us as the fig tree, what God is doing is he's trying to tell me that what's inside of me is him, and I need to embrace that character that he has. You know, we talked about his character earlier, about his mercy and his justness and his humility and his strength. We all have that inside of us. And those are the fruits, I think, that God was looking for when he reached under the fig tree. He's looking for us to embrace the gift that he gave us. He's the only one that could have opened up that door to Eden. He's the only one. And, you know, Romans says, All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? So Christ is the only one that could have opened that door for us. And he did. And now, how much are we taking advantage of that? We have ultimate accessibility to God inside of us. Buna Girgis always used to say, when you hang out with somebody, you spend a lot of time with them, you end up just inheriting some of their traits. You end up just becoming like them. Just by virtue, your friends who you spend your time with, they have influence over you. And you can tell people who are close to Christ by their character. You could see it in them that they've spent a lot of time with God, because the traits of God that we see in the Bible, they have inside of them. We're all, I think, we lean one way or another. Some people lean maybe to be more merciful, and some people lean to be more just. But if we have God inside of us and we access that, I think we can have the balance of someone who is not just meek and humble, but also strong and bold and authoritative. Or if you're strong and bold and authoritative, maybe you need some of that meekness and that humility, God has all of that. So how to access that and put that inside of us? I think the amazing thing about Christianity is the only way that we can be both humble and confident and authoritative, or the only religion I think that gives you that, can be Christianity. Because we are told that nothing we do ourselves makes us good, right? I can't do anything. Again, we have all fallen short of the glory of God. There's nothing I can do that can gain heaven. But we know that Christ did it for us, right? So that makes us a little bit more humble. But we still value ourselves. We still value, we can still have strength and boldness, because although there's nothing we can do, although Christ had to come and die for us, we also know that Christ, God, valued us enough to come and do that. He gives us both sides of the coin. The humility to say, hey, I can't do this alone. I need the grace of God. But at the same time, the confidence and the boldness to say, hey, God loved me enough that this was worth it for him. That the cross, the pain, everything, that was worth it for him because I'm that important. So we should be humble and we should be bold and love ourselves at the same time. It's this amazing dichotomy. And I think, looking at the fig tree, and you can see it throughout the themes of some of the Gospels tonight, what's on the outside doesn't matter. God doesn't care about the outside. He tells in the ninth hour, I just remember hearing in the Gospel, he tells the Pharisees that they clean the outside of the dish, but what inside is dirty. He doesn't want the outside. He doesn't want the big leaves. He wants to see what's underneath. In Hebrews, I think it says that God's word is sharper than any two-edged sword, and it discerns the thoughts and intentions of the heart. It discerns the thoughts and intentions of the heart. God is looking deeper. He's not looking at the outside. He wants to know, what are you doing with Christ inside of you? Are you spending time with that inside? Are you spending time with him? Are you accessing that, or are you throwing it away? And I think the more we access it, the more we take on those characteristics of him. The more humble we become, yet still the more authoritative we become. The more merciful we are, yet still we're equally just. It's a wonderful way to think about God. I mean, again, if you just look at the stories today, it's mostly just God is like, he seems like angry, right? He's cursing the tree and he's throwing people out of the temple. It's like, no, I don't want that. But there's so much more behind it when you look. See, if you look at the outside, You don't quite understand. But when you dig underneath, when you reach underneath the leaf, there's something there. So when God is reaching underneath us and looking inside of us, is there something there or is there not something there? Are we taking advantage of his amazing grace or are we not? So that's all I have. Thank you very much. Glory be to God.